We have one final speaker for this session I'd like to introduce you to. Laura Hurley is Director of Policy for the advisory firm Xiron Global. She has extensive experience in creating regulatory frameworks when she worked for the UK government, creating business models, and she was responsible for the first greenhouse gas removal team and strategy. It's basically DAC by another name. And we've asked her to talk to us about the relevance of direct air capture in the context of the Paris goals. Laura.
Thank you, Nisha.
Good to have you with us.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. And yes, so my name is Laura, and I work for Xiron Global, which is a consultancy. But prior to that, I worked for 12 years in the UK government, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. Tell you the story of policymaking. So greenhouse gas removals is essentially the net bit of net zero. In order to achieve net zero, in order to achieve the goals that each country has set out, we will need an element of removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere because of certain sectors such as aviation or agriculture, which are almost impossible to fully decarbonise. Greenhouse gas removal should never be done in order to deter mitigation or decarbonisation, but all of our modelling shows, and the IPCC recognises the fact that a certain amount of greenhouse gas removal will be needed. So what do I want to talk to you guys about today? In 2020, I was given the job of setting up the UK's first greenhouse gas removal policy team. So I had a blank piece of paper and had to think about, okay, how do we set a policy in place for carbon dioxide removal in the UK? So carbon dioxide removal, by the way, it's more than just direct air capture. It encompasses technologies such as BECCS, so bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, biochar, enhanced weathering, and the oldest technology of them all, trees, afforestation, nature-based solutions to remove carbon from the atmosphere. So immediately you have a tricky policy challenge, quite analogous to the renewables challenge that we had in policy before, thinking about a suite of technologies which have different cost points, have different levels of technological maturity, and also some of them have deployment constraints on them as well. So thinking about how do we set up a policy framework that's technology agnostic at the beginning, avoiding picking winners, but at the same time giving every technology a boost so that you can think about how it goes forward. One of the biggest things to always think about in this is, as a government, you are correcting for an externality. Carbon is creating climate change. Carbon does not naturally carry a price, and therefore the funding and financing with regard to carbon dioxide removal is always a key challenge. I have a few slides just to tell you which always grounded me in thinking about this policy, and I'll conclude with an overview of the approach that we are taking in the UK. This policy is by no means finished and will continue to grow and develop, learning the lessons from other sectors such as renewables. But I suppose this schematic diagram here always grounded me. So this comes from the book, The Innovator's Dilemma, and just thinking about how over time innovation happens and the different levels of support that are required at each stage. Something that's very familiar to many people in the room is this concept of a valley of death with regards to financing. So while there might be research and innovation grants at the beginning, there might be angel or venture capital funding at the beginning of development of a technology. Funding can often fall off a cliff edge before a technology reaches commercialization. So our job in government was always to think about the inverse of the innovator's dilemma. Where and how should government step in with regard to funding and financing? It can support at the beginning through research grants and innovation. It can support through business models, for example, the contract for difference model, in order to commercialize and bridge that valley of death. And then it can step back and let kind of a market evolve and develop around new technologies later. Another thing just to point out is in policy making, it's always so important to learn the lessons and not reinvent the wheel. So while I was working in the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, it was very important to work closely with my colleagues who developed renewables policy in the UK, so contract for difference type models. So what did we come up with? So here are some of the policy commitments that have been made in the UK. I would start at the top there, which is this concept of targets drive results, markets need certainty. Therefore, the UK was the first country to state an ambition of 5 million tonnes of removals by 2030. We said that in the UK's net zero strategy, which was published around the same time as the UK was hosting COP. Our modelling shows that that ambition will have to ramp up quite significantly. So by 2035, we'll need 23 million tonnes of removals. And then by 2050, in order to achieve net zero, somewhere in the range of 75 to 81 million tonnes of removals. But stating that certainty is the first step that the UK government wanted to take to kind of create that glide path and show business, show investment that the UK is serious about carbon dioxide removal. Then, in accordance with the innovator's dilemma, we took a temporal approach to financial support. So we made 100 million of innovation funding available for early stage research for direct air capture and other engineered GGR methods, so as to kind of grow the different solutions, because there's many, many ways of even doing direct air capture. We still don't know which is the best approach. So we wanted to kind of foster that innovation to move towards commercialization. In order to provide more investment certainty, we've developed business models for first-of-a-kind GGRs at commercial scale in the UK. So this contract for difference approach, analogous to the approach that was taken in renewables. The thinking behind a contract for difference is the fact that different methods, so government doesn't want to pick the winner yet. Government doesn't want to just back one technology. But government does acknowledge that each technology has different cost bases, and therefore a contract for difference rewards carbon removed from the atmosphere, but then provides a top-up in order to make different projects at different cost points commercially viable. In the longer term, so we've launched a call for evidence, which we've responded to, on the inclusion of negative emissions in the ETS, and more will be coming forward from the UK on that in the future. But a market-based approach could allow negative emissions and decarbonisation to essentially become fungible. So that's an area of future research. Underpinning all of that, so if markets are being created, robust standards, verifiability, quality removals needs to be achieved. With removals, one of the challenges is an issue of permanence. So some methods are more permanent than others, and therefore a lot of attention was paid to monitoring, reporting, and verification. There were many other considerations, such as international collaboration, which we thought of as well. But that's what I wanted to share with you today, and essentially just that story of, if you're given a blank piece of paper, then how might you go about developing a policy for new technologies which are coming forward, which will help on our energy transition. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura.